Hey, thanks for joining us today. We have a special guest we talked about last week, Randy and Cynthia Lell, and you're about to watch one of the most dynamic videos that I have ever seen or heard of, and it is powerful, powerful. You know,
3 to roughly about 7 years old, 8 years old, it was pretty much just me and Dad. It was other people got involved. Somebody that worked for my dad got involved. There was a waitress. She started grooming me, and I didn't know it was grooming them. She was really nice to me. I was cutting her grass, working in the yard, and she would invite me in, and she made sexual pass at me. And I mean, I'm sitting there, 12 years old, 13 years old. This really beautiful lady is showing an interest in me, and I said that was kind of opened the door, and it just progressed slowly. Things just started getting darker and darker and darker, like boiling fire.
We built this beautiful little house on a hill, and everything was great. We thought life was just gonna sail and everything was gonna be good, but what we didn't realize at that time was the hill that was under us was a volcano.
And the bad thing about addictions is it takes more. I was spending energy internally just keeping a lid on everything. I didn't like myself at all, and so all that was being fueled by the anger that was inside of me. I mean, I was just angry all the time. I was actually really thinking I was going to live like this the rest of my life.
You know, the person I think that in life that I should trust and love the most, and when they are to betray you sexually, I just can't imagine the pain and the hurt that would come from that type of betrayal of a father hurting a little child like that.
You're going to hear in this video a lot of what he went through and how the enemy really was working in his life to stuff all that down, to keep it hidden, and that his brain actually had blocked out most of those memories. And so he was acting out in the marriage and didn't know why. So let's go ahead, let's jump in, let's find out more about their story. And if their story impacts you, hit that thumbs up and leave us a comment if there's something that you have a question about or something that really stands out to you, and we'll be sure to pass that on to them.
Yeah, and we want you to buy their book.
Yes, I'll put a QR code right here. You can scan the code. It'll take you right to Amazon where you can check out their book for yourself.
Hey, so today we're excited. We do have Randy and Cynthia Lell in our studio. We're here today to talk about your story, where you've been, where you've gone, and how you got redemption on the other side of that powerful story, a story of pain, hurt, trauma. But I think that anybody that watching this is going to relate to, listen, I have pain. I have trauma. I've been through some tough circumstances. And you guys have a story of like how it's been to walk through that and get to the other side. And so I'm excited to talk to both of you. You're going to have to buy their book. It's an amazing book. So I would love for you guys just to start off with, before you get to your story, I'd love for you to start off with like, who are you? What's your family like? Where do you live? What area do you live in?
All right, we are Randy and Cynthia Lell. We have been married for 40 years, and we live in Charleston, South Carolina. We have 2 beautiful daughters and 4 amazing grandchildren. Aww. And we spend a lot of time with them, and we go to Seacoast Church, and we are here, and we are together.
Yeah, Seacoast Church, you brought up Seacoast Church, and that's where we go too. So that's the common ground where we met in the Freedom Course and going there. Thank you for sharing about your family. What brings you here right now? What is it that made you choose to write a story and choose to be open and vulnerable and transparent about that story?
Well, first of all, I just want to say the reason why I'm here is Jesus is my best friend. He entered into my life at a time that I was desperate, hopeless feeling about life, and had no meaning, didn't know who I was, and he put his arm around me and took time to stop for me to show me the way. And I'm here because of him. The story that of our life, our marriage, my life, and all is our hope is it's going to reach someone, give them hope, hopefully hope in Jesus, that they'll look to him to show them the way like he showed me.
What brought you to write a book, Randy?
Well, ironically enough, God asked me to. And it wasn't necessarily my choice. It was probably the last thing I wanted to do.
Yeah.
It was during my healing journey, it was roughly about 10 years ago, I was praying about, wasn't in a good spot, but things were, I was feeling better at that time, and things were going okay, and I was just, I was really trying to connect with God, and I was praying, and I just heard him say, and during those years, it wasn't like a continuous, conversations day in, day out. There were just times where I just clearly heard God speak. And he says, I want you to write a book. I said, okay. I said, what's the book going to be called? Our Born Identity. It was just like that. I mean, and it was, it stuck with me for years. But I do remember during the time, I was probably crying 3/4 of the time while I was writing. I would be sitting there, tears streaming down my eyes, and my hands were going, and I sometimes didn't even know what I was typing. It was just like it was rolling out. God was writing it. And, but he was, it was really cool.
So Randy, if you'll walk us through what your life was like growing up, what your childhood was like, and how it led into what we're actually here for today in your book.
So, I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I was born in 1961. So Charlotte was a sleepy town then. It was just a small southern town, and our family was Southern Baptist. I was the youngest of 4, and parents were both very involved in their church. If the doors were open, we were there. That's kind of the way I remember it. It was Sunday night, Wednesday night, whatever was going on. So, but you would see us as a traditional Southern family, very polished, proper, good manners. So just nothing different than just about anybody else. But that was on the surface.
You had a great exterior look.
Yes, good dinner.
Yeah.
And but my childhood was looking back on it was I was isolated. I didn't have a lot of friends, so it was just a tough time. I had a struggle as a kid, from 3 to roughly about 7 years old, 8 years old. It was pretty much just me and Dad. It was that, and kind of thinking back, I remember even thinking at one point I said, I might have been okay if it just stayed that way, but it turned dark after that. Other people got involved. Somebody that worked for my dad got involved. There was a waitress that I talk about. Her name was Sue. She got involved. She's the only name I can remember, and I don't know why. But and it's not important more than it is just what went down. But Sue was grooming me, and started out very innocently. As I was more toward 11, 12-year-old time frame. And she started grooming me, and I didn't know it was grooming. I was looking back at it and it was grooming then. But she was really nice to me. I was cutting her grass, working in the yard, and she would invite me in, and she made sexual pass at me. And I'm sitting there when 12 years old, 13 years old. This really beautiful lady is showing an interest in me, and I said, I didn't really think too much about it. It was just kind of the hormones at that age, I guess, were going on anyway. So, but that was kind of opened the door. And it just progressed slowly. Things just started getting darker and darker and darker, like boiling a frog in water, bringing it up slowly. And before I realized, I think if I had any realization it was wrong, I think I did have some realization it was wrong. She would cross-dress me. Started out very slight, very just, simple, and then it just progressed more and more. And then she started inviting people over. Sometimes it'd be other women with other boys like me. And it just started getting more and more, and, it kind of developing into a little bit of a pedophilia thing. But there were multiple kids involved, and they were all boys, and they were all being groomed.
Wow.
And I don't have any relationship or know what the relationship to the other people were. I just know when I would go over there, these things were staged. And then as time progressed, more men started getting involved. And it was almost like, it looked like to me that it was a handoff, grooming me, preparing me for pedophilia type relationships. And then trafficking entered, where I speak about a camp in the book. That I had gone to, and then there were men brought in that would use the boys in the camp.
Wow.
And not long after that incident, that was roughly about 1975, I had a total breakdown. It was just like, your mind was affecting how the body worked. And I collapsed a number of times in school. I had a paralysis in my legs. I never really lost consciousness or anything like that, or had trouble with memory or anything, but I was definitely, my body was definitely screaming for help. Yeah. So I was hospitalized twice. Even received shock therapy treatment once. And I think that second hospital time, I spent extended time there on the psychiatric floor. That was what stopped that event. Somehow either enough scared my dad, and I have no idea what my dad and my mom knew. I know what my dad knew. I don't know what my mom knew. I think mom was closing her eyes to it, trying to hold on that persona, that perfect Southern family.
Sure.
So But after that was when I was 14. After that, it all stopped. I never saw Sue again or her boyfriend that worked for my dad. Never saw him then. He didn't work for my dad anymore. And that was it. And it was just kind of like after that incident, everything shut off. I mean, I lost all the memories of it. I lost, I don't know if it's kind of the shock treatment or the trauma, maybe a little bit of both. It's just, I didn't even really have any. It's just like I started over again, almost like a reboot. It was fresh start. I even remember thinking, man, I can just. I remember having a conscious thought about starting over again. I'm not going to worry about trying to prove myself and make friends. I'm just going. If they don't like me, heck with them. And I remember making that conscious decision. I started my life at that point, kind of changed, and everything changed. It was just like I made friends. We had good church friends. The next that year we met. That same year we met, and in church. And I still, you talk about that story. I still to this day remember the first day I laid eyes on her. I mean, it was just like, you meet a lot of people in your life. I don't remember them, how I met other people. I just know they were in my life. I remember the first day I saw her. She came flying into the choir room on the Sunday afternoon, and I had just started going to this church, and 3 or 4 other girls were with her. She was the only one that caught my eye. And so I think we knew all along that we were supposed to be together.
Probably so.
But so with a fresh start, I mean, it changed everything for me. It changed how I felt about myself. I didn't worry about trying to fit in. So, and that was really nice. And so Cynthia and I meet 8th, 9th grade time frame, and we just become good friends.
We were in the youth group at Providence Baptist Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we just kind of hit it off as good friends and just became, we were best friends all through there. And then we were seniors in high school, and he asked me to homecoming, and I was like, yuck, he's just my friend. I don't want to go out with him. But we went out, and it was like, okay, when are we getting married now? It was just the friendship was already there. All we were missing was that part. And so we both graduated from college, but we got married, and we started our life together in Charlotte. And now, after the fact, God has given me a picture of when we got married. We built this beautiful little house on a hill, and everything was great. We thought life was just going to sail and everything was going to be good. But what we didn't realize at that time was the hill that was under us was a volcano. And I wasn't too far into our marriage, maybe a year or two before it started rumbling. And it was shaking. It was shaking our marriage very hard. There were some minor eruptions, and there were some pretty major eruptions through there. But we finally, you'll hear from our story, we finally got through it. And but all through it, God just showed me that the house stayed together only because it was put together with God glue, that God was there, and God held us together through those years, because that we could have easily just given up. And both of us, Randy could have just given up trying to get help, and I could have just given up on him and walked out, and life probably would have been easier in a way, but we wouldn't have what we have now, because now we have that beautiful house that has scars, but the hill underneath us is beautiful. There's no more volcano, and we're just, life is awesome now. But we had a lot of really bad years. We've been married 40 years, and I would say 30, really probably 30 of them. I used to say we were married 30 years. Oh no, I mean 3,000. But so a lot of those years were very, very long. But God held us together, and I think He held us together for this day, so that we would be able to help other people hold it together when things looking really, really bad, and you could easily give up, but we didn't. We kept it together, and then went on out. And we had 2 beautiful girls through it, and the grandkids, and and our relationship now is amazing. So it was well worth it, but it was rough. It was a tough time, a lot of tough times.
Cynthia, that's a beautiful analogy. I've had the privilege of reading your book, and so it's a beautiful analogy of the story that I've read of your life, of this volcano erupting and going everywhere, and then going dormant again, and then erupting and going dormant. But I love one of the things you mentioned. You said God glue, and I know that God talks in the Bible. It talks about this foundation that we need of Christ, this solid rock of Christ to be able to get us through things. And I really love that weaved through your story of how you've relied on Jesus throughout your story. Share with us what that was like navigating through those volcano erupting.
Yeah, so that, and Cynthia and I kind of fell in love with each other, I guess, 12th grade, and started dating in 12th grade, and we didn't go to the same college, but we were close enough. She was at Clemson, I was at Western Carolina, and the things in college, I got exposed to some pornography magazines, and through one of my roommate in college, and it kind of triggered something in me, and it was like a familiar feeling. type thing. And I was reading through like the penthouse forums. I mean, you know, those were a big thing back in the 80s, and there were sections in there that were about BDSM and different types of, you know, people controlling other people, and it really resonated in me, and I didn't know why, and but it was so strong that it just drew me in, and I got fascinated with the articles and the imagery and everything that was to it, and it just slowly crept in and got a hook in me. And I even said something that showed Cynthia the magazines and the articles and stuff, you know, while we were visiting back and forth between college and stuff like that. And, you know, a few years passed after that. We wound up, Cynthia got out of college in 3 years. It was a remarkable achievement. So I did the normal way, 4-year route. And we got married in my last year of college, so we lived at Western together. So that's how it entered. And then, but it kind of lit a fire, and it just kind of kept rising up. It was just like cyclical cycles, you know, months and months apart. But that's how it started. And so we moved back to Charlotte. There was a lot more access to material, you know, adult bookstores and stuff like that. So I would make my trips to the adult bookstores and pick up the stuff. And, you know, I wanted to share it. I mean, you know, I wanted someone to experience this with. And that was kind of the beginning of introducing Cynthia to it. And so, you know, we get married, you know, we had kids around 20, when we were 26. I think we had our first daughter, Whitney, and then Laurel came 18 months later. And my addiction was taken off about that time. And the bad thing about addictions is it takes more each time you do it.
Right.
And it continues to grow, and that's what happened. It just continued to grow. So it went from reading magazines to finding pictures that went along with it, more, you know, graphic stories, and then it finally moved to trying to see if I could find it. And that was pre-internet, and so it was a lot more harder to do that in the pre-internet days. But there were ways.
Right.
And yeah, so it was that's kind of where it all started. It just started, you know, I had no idea what was driving it other than it felt right. For some weird reason, it just seemed to feel right because nothing else was working, but my self-esteem was slowly getting ate away, and I didn't realize it. And I was doing the same thing to her. She was not feeling, you know, good enough. That I didn't find her good enough, that we needed to bring this in to make it right. So it was eating away our intimacy. It was eating away at our self-esteems. Probably some degree it was stressing our love for each other, but our love seemed to stay intact. And but it wasn't always. It was when those cycles would come around. It was just kind of like, I think Cynthia braced herself, and I was just kind of grabbing on to everything I could, and then it would cycle away, and then life would go back to normal again, right?
So there were good times.
Yeah, there were a lot of good times.
Yeah.
And but the dread of the cycle coming, and I'm not even saying that there was a little bit of dread from my side, because I knew I was testing our marriage doing this. It was not that it was intentional testing, but it was a subconscious like test. And I was very watchful. She was like, you know, walking on eggshells around me, and I was very watchful, kind of how she was reacting. I was looking to see, I wonder if I could talk her into doing this. And it went like that. I mean, it was, you know, going on, you know, so it was starting to slowly eat up more and more and more of my time. I had a business. I got a business going at that point, and I started ordering stuff through the business.
Yeah, Randy doesn't do anything halfway. If he's into it, he's 100% into
Right.
it. So not only did we need to go to scenes, we needed to buy all the equipment, all the little
All the gear.
all the gear. Yeah, we had to buy all the gear. And if we went off together, we had to take all the gear. I believe that when we got married, you know, we brought God into our marriage. And so God was there through every step. And I never really thought about leaving. I knew I was fed up with it, and I was tired, but I was on the journey with him. I just wanted him to be healed. I knew there was a great Randy in there, and I knew that we would get there someday. And I would picture myself actually dropping my kids off at his new house with his new wife and regretting that we didn't fight enough for it. And so I would just keep thinking, we're going to keep fighting. We're just going to keep going. And so I didn't have nobody in my life knew what was going on. No friends, nobody. So I didn't have anybody speaking into me, telling me I needed to leave. And I think that helped, because it was really it was the two of us and God, really. I mean, nobody knew. Nobody knew anything.
So Cynthia, what were some of the things that you were walking through, you know, in a relationship with Randy while he was going through all of this?
It mainly had to do with sex. He was never satisfied. He was always searching, is what I felt like, because it never seemed to be enough. I mean, he even had a prostitute come to our house one day, determined to figure out what it was he was searching for. Was it the control that she had over him or what? And so he got very interested in the BDSM lifestyle. I worked with him in it because I kept thinking it's going to help him. And if I don't help him, he's going to go find somebody else, is what I was really thinking. This is so important to him that he is going to find it, and he's going to adventure into this lifestyle, whether I'm a part of it or not. And so I would go with him and hated every second of it. It was the worst time, but God got us through it. And eventually he got to the point where he realized that wasn't helping either. When you moved out one time.
I moved out.
And that was almost a relief when he moved out, because I was like, oh my goodness, I could live without this, putting up with this all the time. But then that didn't last very long. He came, it was a relief, but yet I missed him. And then when he came back, everything was.
Yeah, when I left, I actually had a bit of a mental breakdown. I mean, I shut down everything. I mean, I was non-responsive to vocal, people asking me, Randy, and I kind of remember it. But I was just almost comatose. But I was awake. I was, sitting up, but wouldn't respond. And they took me to the doctor and hospital, and then kind of came out of it that night. And my brother came down and hung out with me for a little while. She wouldn't let me come home.
Well, because my mother was there, and she was saying, "Don't you dare let him come home. Don't you dare let him back." Yeah. And so I didn't. But the whole time I wanted him to come home, because that's where he belonged. And then it was after that he left for good. He said he quit his job. Left me a Dear John letter on the pillow, letting me know that he had quit his job and he had taken the boat. You think of these funny things, but and then left me some money and said, I'm no good. I'm not any good to anybody. I'm just gonna.
There was no rational thought process to that second time. I mean, it was just like I'd walk by something and say, well, I'm gonna take that with me too. I mean, it just didn't make any sense. I was not thinking clearly. I was in a very dark place, and I just wanted to die. Yeah, I just wanted to die.
What you're referring to is something that, in now that we're in marriage ministry, we specifically look at a lot of addiction type stuff. And that's what you're referring to is some common things that happen is creating different routines and fantasies and rituals. Thank you. And rituals. And that's it's common from what we've understood too in relationships.
Yeah, that's the way our life was. Exactly. And even fast forwarding to today, I didn't understand because of the PTSD and everything I'd been dealing with. I found, I was spending energy internally just keeping a lid on everything. So work, family, life in general. I mean, I put my focus in work. I actually buried myself in work. Family was coming second because family I couldn't control very well. I couldn't control work. And so it didn't leave any room for any energy for relationships, friends. I was systematically cutting everybody off. I didn't like myself at all. And so all that was being fueled by the anger that was inside of me. I mean, I was just angry all the time, to the point that I even tried, different depression medications and stuff like that to kind of keep myself level. And I hated the way it made me feel. So that just made me madder as I go off of it. And you can imagine, taking a chemical like that, getting in your system, going off of it. I mean, you've heard all the stories that just kind of, you have explosive behavior. So, so it was just and I was never really, I was not an alcoholic, but I did drink. Probably more than I needed to. So I looked for things, and my sexual addiction was roaring during those years. So everything I could medicate with to manage the anger, manage the pressure, and all that, that's what it's like. So all those ebb and flows, all those things being let in, let out was you just never knew where the anger was going to spew from. It wasn't what Cynthia or the kids or someone at work did. It was just, it had to do with my level and intensity underneath the surface that I couldn't handle. And it would just, literally, sometimes it was really bad.
And at that time, were you even aware of what all that was?
I was just aware of the struggle.
Right.
I was not aware of the why.
Yes.
And during those years, I was not remembering my abuse. So, but the effects of the abuse were percolating up, and you just didn't know how it was going to come out, and it was rough, and it was really confusing for me. It was very confusing for them.
It was very hard on the girls. They never knew which Randy they were going to see.
Yeah,
they never knew how far was Dad going to be just totally into himself and not have anything to do with them, or was he going to be angry?
Right.
So it was so during those years, I could not make him happy, but I could make the girls happy. So I focused on my girls and I just kind of, we lived together and stuff, but I just kind of wrote him off because I couldn't fix him and I didn't know what his problem was, but I could make the girls happy. So we just kind of went on, and it affected the girls. It was a hard life for them growing up. They were, I think afraid it still bothers them to this day, but
Yeah, that would make
it was
sense.
tough. It was tough.
In the midst of all that, in those years, I didn't have any basis to form a question as to what the lie was about. When I finally began to remember, that was after a prayer in 2010.
What was that prayer?
I asked God, I said, I want to go deeper with you. I want to know you more intimately.
Mm.
And I'm sorry, not 2010, it was 2008.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I wanted to go deeper. And in one of those clear moments where I was hearing him, he said, if you want to know me deeper, I need to show you something first.
I need to show you something.
And that was the first flashback.
Well, you said go for it.
I did. I said, go for it. I said, well, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
And well, that's sorry. No. At the time, I was very, I
Sure.
regretted saying do that because the flashback hit and all the emotional pain, feeling, it just happened in a flash. I mean, it was overwhelming. And then it happened again. And then it happened again. That whole day was ate up with that first day. And I remember going to my pastor at Seacoast at the time, and I said, I don't know what to do with this. And I told him what was going on. I told him the whole story, and he prayed with me, and I just sat there and bawled. I mean, I was bawling. I mean, it was one of those nose blowing, eyes tearing kind of cries. I mean, I couldn't stop. And bless his heart, I think I did. It was just kind of like, yeah, he was going to, did I sign up for this? and he tried, I mean, he really, I mean, it was, we went for months. I went to months seeing him, just kind of processing this because the memories just kept coming. And then it started to subside and got a little better. And I started asking why. That's when the why started coming into play. And I think I actually started connecting the dots a little bit. It has to do with what's going on, why I'm so, I don't know. I mean, it was just so much, it was so overwhelming. I didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And so I was prayed for, I was prayed over, rebaptized. I mean, I was willing to do anything to get that stuff to stop. But nothing helped. At that point in time, nothing helped. I mean, I'd get respites, but nothing helped. And most of the time, the only thing that would really help is if I just really focused on it and said, okay, I'm not going to think about this anymore, I'm going to stuff it. And then I could do that, and it would turn off for a while. But it was exhausting.
Yeah.
Because as soon as I start to feel like, okay, I can catch my breath, and I let my guard down, it'd start up again. And it was just, the kids were out of the house at that point, and starting their own lives, families. And so it was just me and Cynthia. So she had me all alone.
I went out, he could sit on the front porch, and if I went out there and sat, I thought, I'm going to hear these stories.
So my drinking went up again, and my sexual addiction kicked in, but it was different. The sexual addiction was a little bit different at that point. It was more in the head than it was out. But it was still a lot of porn, that kind of stuff. So, but it was just like an internal mechanism that it was triggering inside of me that I just needed to medicate. I needed to numb. I just didn't want to feel it. Yeah. Because anytime I thought about those memories, I felt them. Normally a long-term memory is like you've had weeks and days ago. You remember it, and there's a little bit of emotional attachment to it, but it's not in the moment.
Right.
And what happens with PTSD is that memory never processes this over to long term, and it stays locked away, tucked in there, and it stays active. It's like repeating the moment over and over and over again, and experiencing the pain, the trauma, all the emotions, sometimes even touch. I would have waking dreams, just kind of like in the intermediate time where you're not quite asleep, but you start to kind of kick off. And I would have this feeling that someone was coming into the room. I'd hear them, and I'd feel someone sit on the side of the bed, and then reach over, and I feel someone sometimes touch my back, but sometimes or my shoulder. And that's what would happen when I was a child. When my father would come in the room, he would sit on the side of the bed, he would roll me over, and that's where my abuse started. Was in the bed, and I still had that imagery. My brain was just kind of reliving it. Sure. And I would jump out of the bed as soon as he touched me. As soon as I felt that touch, I would jump out of the bed and scream at the top of my lungs. And sometimes it got so bad I could sleep in another room. And but then I would be in the other room, and I'd be afraid to go to sleep. Because I didn't want to be in there by myself. I mean, this is a 50-year-old man going through those feelings. Yeah. But you think about it, the abuse was coming out of me being a kid. So there's a part of me that's still a kid in there that's scared to death. Sure. So I mean, it's kind of like I'm a 50-year-old man, but I'm thinking about reacting like a child would. I don't want to be alone. So it was awful.
So share a little bit about what you've realized now, what that abuse was like for you when it started and how long it went until you really started to discover that that's what was underneath this volcano that we referred to.
Yeah, so the abuse started when I was 3, and it went till I was roughly about 14. The abuse memories, as they started unfolding early, 3, 4, 5-year-old type time frame. Those things were coming out, and I was spending a lot of time dealing with pastors and kind of trying to get counseling, and it just wasn't working, and they were not equipped. Not from a lack of trying. The guys did their best. I give them that, but they just weren't equipped. Didn't know what to do with someone who was dealing with a trauma like this. And I finally just decided one day, I got to get some help. I can't keep doing this. I mean, I wasn't sure how much I was going to be, if I was going to be able to hang on. And so I reached out and found just an amazing lady. We call her Dr. Marks in the book. It's not a real name, and I won't say her real name, but she's a psychologist, and she specialized in PTSD and childhood sexual abuse.
We tried to find a therapist that was Christian and we just couldn't.
Yeah.
We couldn't. So we finally said, we need somebody who specializes in abuse.
Yeah,
so
childhood abuse. Yeah.
we prayed really hard, and we found her, and she was awesome.
Yeah.
She was.
So she diagnosed me. I should say she diagnosed me with PTSD. You're right. We didn't necessarily recognize it was PTSD at the time, but she diagnosed me early on, and she screened me for it. And she said, "You're totally on the upper side of the scale for PTSD." And I thought that was a combat thing, for military people. And she said, "Oh no." She says, "Any trauma will cause PTSD." And so that's kind of where I started learning about PTSD. And but I'm no means an expert at it from a clinical side, but I certainly can. I'm an expert at it on living it.
You've experienced it.
Yeah, yeah. But So we went through years of therapy with her. Helped a lot. We did a process called EMDR. We talk about that in the book.
And so through that is how some of the
So
the rest
that
of the memories
process would
started
help
coming out.
what it does is kind of helps to open the brain up. And it's not talk therapy, so she's not discussing it with me, but she's allowing the brain to do the work. And gosh, we did that for years, and we finally just reached a block where some of the very traumatic memories weren't coming out. And she suggested that we try a clinical trial. She knew the people who were managing it in Charleston, and where they employed MDMA. And the street name for that is ecstasy. Yeah. So most people remember that. It's a class 1 drug now. It's outlawed. So it was originally developed for psychological, support. What they're finding now is there's a lot of other psychedelic type medication that will what helps with healing. Will help healing. So
this is the most intriguing part there's a lot of intriguing parts of your guys' story. But this one specifically, I think, is one of the most intriguing parts of your guys' story, specifically to me, is the level of healing that you received in such short time frames doing this trial procedure. After reading your book, I was just amazed at this particular section of, you've had a lot of therapy, you've had a lot of talking, you've had EMDR, which EMDR is amazing. We both experienced a lot of great results from it. But specifically MDMA and the trial that you went through, I'm just blown away at the amount of recovery and healing that you talked about.
While he was going through all this therapy, I kept thinking to myself, every time he talked about it, I kept saying his dad took he's going to be laying on his deathbed, and he's going to say, my dad took the first 14 years of my life. Why did I give him the rest? I let him ruin my entire life. Why can he not just put it away? Just it happened. It was horrible. Put it in a box, lock it up, and get on with your life. Let's just get on with our lives. Because at that point we had our own business. We lost our business. We filed bankruptcy. We lost all the money we had for kids' college. We lost everything. We had to start completely over at 40. I guess everything was gone. And I just kept saying, just get over it. Just get over it. And finally I told him, I said, I need to go talk to your therapist. And he was like, let's make the appointment right now. So I went and I talked to her, and I told her that. And she said, oh, honey, he can't. She said, the brain does not operate that way. She said, you picture it, those memories are at the back of his brain, and they're just tickling, and they've got to come out. He has got to have those memories come out, and then he can put them away. But they have to be, those memories have to be brought into, how does it work? From short term to...
Yeah, so so what we experience every day is, like today, our conversation, that's short-term memory today. So when you go to bed tonight, your brain converts all those memories from today to long-term memory, and it wipes the short-term memory clean. That's a very simple, layman's term about it, but that's how it was explained to me. I'm sure there's other clinical processes into it. We talk about the amygdala and all that stuff. So, But but that made a lot of sense to me, and those memories are trapped.
Right.
PTSD traps them, and they stay current, and they hide back in there, and that's why combat soldiers, like when they shoot off 4th of July fireworks, they go hide in their closet. I know a guy who goes and hides in his closet still to this day, just traumatized, curled up in a ball, but because he hasn't processed it all yet.
But
So that's what was going on with me. So that was the block. That was why the EMDR couldn't reach its limit. And we needed something else to push through. So that's where the MDMA comes in. It lowers the fear level and raises the confidence level.
Once she told me that he could not do that, that he had to process these memories, I went home and my whole attitude changed. I believe our whole marriage changed at that point, because I understood then. I understood that he couldn't just let it go. That there was, it was like I went back years and I understood all the acting out that he did. This was an underlying factor that caused him to have affairs and all the other deviancy that he went through, and all that we had to deal with this. So I went home and said, okay, we're going to figure this out. And I believe it was the next day, I was reading an article in the Post and Courier. We were living in Charleston at that point. We had moved there after we lost the business, and there was an article about the Charleston 9, or the 9 firefighters that died in the sofa store fire, and there was an article about one of those survivors. And he had gone through this study, and because to help him with his PTSD. And so I told Randy, I said, wonder if this would help you. I was like, yeah, that's exactly what you said. But you know what? It kept bugging him all day. And then he called his therapist, and she said, oh, that would be perfect for you. I know the guy who's doing it. It's an actual study to get FDA approval for the use of this drug. And so she helped us go through all the testing. The testing was so intense. We had to have all kinds of ultrasounds, blood work, everything. They wanted to be sure nobody was going to die on the table,
Right.
and ruin the study. Is what they, that type thing. So it was very intense. So that time was very tough because he knew it was going to get shot down. Anything that went wrong, fine. I knew it wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
That type thing. And they found a tiny little cyst on my thyroid, and they said, "Oh, you got thyroid cancer. You're not going to be able to be in it." So I said, well, let me go get it tested. Well, it's just a little tiny thing. And so they passed us on that. So the day they accepted us for the study was just a day of celebration, because we thought there's finally hope. There is something that's going to help us.
So tell us a little bit about that process of MDMA and what that was like for you.
Wow, it was we had to apply and get accepted. So at that point, I was starting to build the foundation for a little bit of hope. I hadn't had hope in a long time. And I was actually really thinking I was going to live like this the rest of my life. And kind of trying to rationalize, okay, I did it before. If this is the best it's going to get, I think maybe I can be okay with this. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that was going through my head. So something upcoming that presents help. I was so wore out on all the failures of not being able to move forward, and getting stuck again, that I was really afraid to give this a lot of credit. I think that's probably what was the basis of my initial reaction when she brought it up. But something inside, I know now, the Spirit of God kept pushing me, keep going, and don't give up.
Yeah.
And so we applied. We had to go through all these physical testing. They poked and prodded, drew blood, did X-rays, MRIs.
Well, and also some of the studies were just the PTSD survivor, and this one was a couple study.
Yeah.
So they needed us both. That's why I had to be tested, but they needed both of us to be in as the PTSD survivor and the spouse who lived through it. I call it, I had secondhand PTSD.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. It was exactly what I had.
Yeah.
But so that's why I had to be tested, and we got through the testing, and then we had to go through a lot of we did a lot of therapy before it.
Right. Yeah. So there was therapy. There was just kind of talk therapy where they were just basically baselining. So I imagine a clinical trial, they have to do a lot of baselining and kind of say this is where this patient is right now. This is how they test. So they were always testing my PTSD level and hers.
Yeah.
They were looking at all that, and so it was over quite a few months of going through all this, so physical, mental testing, all that kind of thing, and then we get to August where the first treatment happens. And during that time, we had agreed to do a documentary. So this documentary team, separate from the organization that was running the study, agreed to. They wanted to. This would be the first documentation of taking someone before testing to after testing. So the study involves two sessions. They're spaced about 3 weeks apart, and so going into that, we're doing all this filming. So we've learned a lot about it took 8 hours to get 10 minutes of production. So,
But when they asked
we
us,
spent days doing this stuff, and I was sitting here. I mean, dealing in the state I was at right now, I had all this anxiety, all these questions, and I was just sitting there going, "Oh God, I don't know if I can do this," and flight feelings, and I was ready to run. I mean, it was an emotional roller coaster. I'm surprised I even managed work. I finally wound up taking about a week off right there at the time for the thing, just because I couldn't focus on work. I was snapping at everybody.
it was very stressful. When they asked us, would you be willing to do that? We were like, God, if you're going to use this, then how better than a documentary?
So was the MDMA the first one successful to you in any way?
Yes.
And how was that successful?
So the two sessions were interesting. There was a lot of visualization from it. So we take the MDMA right at the beginning of the day, and I always joke about this. He said he held out 2 pills, and I went back to the Matrix and I started laughing. I said, "Where's I want the blue one?" But they were dosage. They were milligrams. So we said, "Well, we want the 100 milligram, not 75." So
We're going to do this thing.
we're going to do it right. We're going to do it. And but so what was really cool about it, the way it works is there's no you really just sit back in the chair, you take the pill, you sit back in the chair, and you kind of zone out, and if that's the best way to say it, and you go inside, you just kind of let your brain do the work. He explained it to us. He says, "Randy, the best way for this to work is you need to get out of its way.
Yeah.
Don't overthink it, and just relax and let your brain do it." He said, "Your brain knows how to heal itself, just like your body knows how to heal itself when you get a cut."
Yeah.
Stuff like that. And he said the reason we're here is no different than an emergency room doctor. If you're in a car wreck, your body needs a little bit of help. You just sew it up or fix an organ or fix something in there, and then your body can heal from that. I thought that was a beautiful analogy. The way he was really good at putting it in a good layman's term where people could understand, and that just made a lot of sense to me. So I said, okay. I had asked the Lord to come into this with us before we came in, and I said, I'd like, I don't want to do this by myself. Maybe though Cynthia was there, I kind of had a sense that I was going into something that terrified me, and I said, I don't want to do this by myself. And that's what he did. He met me in the vision. I mean, this was an 8-hour session, and there were 2 doses of MDMA. There was breaks built kind of in there it was kind of an ebb and flow of breaks as I kind of said, okay, I can't do this anymore. I would just kind of sit up, but it was God just met me in there, and he walked me through all of the trauma. Started from the very beginning where it started, and he just sat with me. Some of the vision was I saw it in third person, where I was watching it happen, and there was some that was first person, but he was always there, and it was just amazing that he would just sit there and he would reach over and hold my hand, or put his hand on my back, or hug me, and if I felt like it was too much, he'd say okay, and boom, it would stop. It was crazy. I know God was in this with me. I know that for a fact, because there's no way that interaction that I had with him could have been a vision a hallucination.
Yeah, I can see it's touching you now, just even talking about it.
Right. So we get through the first one, and it's just, wow. I mean, I feel like I'm riding a high on top of the world. I mean, I felt so much release immediately. And so they talked us through and said, "Hey, listen, the next couple of weeks to lead up to the next session, you're going to have a lot of memories coming in. You're going to have a lot of emotional swings and stuff like that." And boy, did I! It was a wild ride for those 3 weeks. I mean, went from feeling really great, kind of a high there right at the end, and going into just a lot of emotional turmoil. I mean, it was
processing. I'm sure
processing. Yeah.
And the more it was like he had seen the one scene that was so bad, and that was probably at the point where he was curled up in a ball. He was in the fetal position, and his whole body was just shaking. And I was just laying up there. I laid back. They lay you back in recliners, put a blanket over you, put earphones on with real music, like yoga music. I think it may have been. I don't know, but I just laid there and said, okay, God, if there's something I need to see, I want you to show it to me. Otherwise, I'm just going to sit here and pray for him. I just want you to walk him through this. Just be with him, because this is going to be bad. And boy, it was bad. He would be shaking all over. He would be involved. And then sometimes after one of those, he would finally release and he would just sit up. And so then we would all sit up, or we would both sit up, and they would talk to him about what he saw and all that kind of stuff, and go to the bathroom, have a drink of water or something. And then we would lay back down and start again. And I was like, how does he lay back down? How can he do that again? But with knowing Jesus was right there holding him, it was, I mean, at times the psychiatrist would go over, or whatever, the doctor was, would go over and just put his hand on him. Because I would be like wanting to get up and he would be like, no, just let me go. And they would just barely touch him and things like that, just so that he knew he wasn't alone. You know, that kind of, little did we know he knew he wasn't alone, because Jesus was walking him through the whole thing.
I had a sense they were doing that. I mean, I wasn't, out of it to where I couldn't sense some surroundings, but I wasn't focused on them. The focus wasn't there.
Sure.
And, yeah, I mean, I experienced a lot of memories. A lot of it I experienced, I'd already recovered in the EMDR. And there was what he did in this vision, though, was put a lot of things in the proper order, I realized. So it was like walking through those years and laying it out. I recovered a tremendous amount more memories after the sessions were done, after the process was done. But we did walk through those, and I did get some new revelation out of it. But so a lot of the visions were, he would show me visions of I saw my grandmother. I write in there about a grandmother's prayer in the book, and I see her, and I mean, she talks to me. I get to hug her, and Jesus is standing on one side and she's on the other, and she tells me how proud she is. And I think I mentioned in the book I didn't like those kind of terms, but I took it from her. She always, I started hearing this phrase, and I since heard it more in church circles and stuff. I guess I never paid attention in the past. She looked at me and she pointed over here and she goes, "He's got you. You don't have to worry about it." But so that was what that first session was about. It was crazy. It was crazy stuff. And the second session came 3 weeks later. I mean, like I said, that was a very tumultuous 3 weeks, very emotional roller coaster ride. But I did know that my PTSD screenings came down.
Okay.
They were tracking all that, and not a lot, but maybe a point. I don't even remember what the scale was now. It's been 2 years.
So it's a bunch of questions.
Yeah,
About
a
10
lot.
questions.
Yeah, and
So
but so the next session comes in, and very similar. Start out the gate, and we take the medication and lay back in the chair, and just kind of. And I was struggling at that one because I think I came into the meeting. I came into the session with some expectations, and it finally occurred to me. I said, "Wait," I said, "I got to clear. Just had to let it go and just clear my head." I said, "Okay, God, you got it." And I go right back to the beginning again. We rerun the whole thing, but from a little bit different perspective this time. It was faster paced. I saw more detail at each one, at each point, and but at the end of the day, I mean, but it wasn't stressful. That day was not. No, it wasn't near as stressful as the first session. I was a lot more relaxed, more peace, felt really calm, and but the visions were just incredible. I saw my whole family. So mom, dad, brother Wayne, my grandmother again, and I wasn't real happy about seeing my dad in that moment, because I realized he stood back. The rest of them came to me. He stood back, and it wasn't like he was sad or anything, but he stood back, and I think that was by design, because I think Jesus knew I wasn't ready to see him, and I didn't even acknowledge him, talk to him or anything. He did talk to me. He said, "Hey, son," but I just wasn't sure I could deal with it.
Yeah.
So I go into that a little bit in the book, but it was more of maybe a reconciliation, family trying to come to peace and terms and forgiveness. I forgave them all at that point. I've since forgiven, or got okay with. I mean, I forgive my dad. I mean, but I'm happy that he's there now. I'm happy that he found his way at the end before it was too late. And it's like the parable of the talents. He came late, but he still got his reward. And so it just goes to show that redemption's is something that's just freely given, and all you have to do is ask. I don't know what his moment was, but I'm glad he found it. But that doesn't mean I forget what was done.
Right.
Right.
So the final scene in that last session was probably one of the most impactful scenes I think I've had, or visions that I've had ever. Was Jesus said, they all left. Jesus said, "I got something I want to show you." You gotta understand. You hear a lot of people who talk about. They say they've been to heaven, and how beautiful and everything it is. My experience wasn't that way. My experience was like where we were standing. I mean, I felt nothing but pure joy, pure peace. I mean, just can't even describe it. But didn't see anything else beyond a faded out border. It was kind of like when they came in, they passed through like a wall of fog.
Yeah.
And stepped into where I was at and came into view. And I don't know if that was by design or what. Maybe I'm sure it was, but I don't know why it was done that way. But we were walking along, and while we were walking, I look up, I glance up, and I see these incredible, beautiful shooting streaks of light coming from everywhere. It's colors I've never even seen before. And then as we continue to walk, we pass through something like a doorway, and then it all cuts off. You don't see the lights anymore. And that was the throne room scene that I talk about in the book. And that was just an incredible experience. I mean, when God spoke, says, "Who is this?" I felt it through every fiber of my body. It was just like it wasn't coming from a direction, it was just everywhere. The voice it was incredible. And Jesus says, "This is my friend, and I vouch for him." And I mean, it was I didn't know what to think. And so, I come out of that vision, and I sit up, and I'm just kind of going, "What?" And I tell them about it.
They were going.
Their eyes were like this. And that vision just impacted me in an incredible way. It changed my life. And I came out of the days following that, going through the final part of the testing. It lasted another month, maybe. We had weekly check-ins and stuff. And they tested me, and PTSD was gone. And I mean, I thought at that time in the moment, we're done. And I'm not trying to say it was a bad thing. I mean, I wasn't done. What I didn't anticipate really, but they warned us about that you're going to recover memories over the months and maybe even years. And that happened for me. But I mean, it was recovering them after that, after the PTSD was gone, was a cakewalk compared to the first time doing it with the EMDR.
Right.
And I've always wondered about would God or Jesus or would God have healed me without doing this? I mean, I think the answer to that is, of course, He could. But would the struggle, the experience, the story glorify Him if He had done it the other way and I didn't go through the healing and the journey that I've gone through? Because the way I look at it right now, there's so many people out there right now that are where I was, and they don't know how to come out of this. They don't need hope, and if my story will give them hope because my story was a partnership with God, and I've got to the other side and I'm healed now. Maybe that's the path for those guys to take. So I might maybe get a little ahead of myself.
What would you say to the people listening that have a similar story or have a story of trauma and they don't feel like God is there and they don't feel like they can get to another side?
Yeah. Well, I was at that point at one point. I didn't feel like God cared. I was just too far gone. I wasn't redeemable. I mean, I did feel that way, and I'm sure there are people out there that feel that way. My encouragement to them is don't give up. I worked harder than I think I've ever done anything trying to heal. I was determined to get healed.
Yeah.
I tried the other way. I tried to take my life one time, and I swore I would never do that again. I wouldn't do that. My family. That was my crash at the bottom time. And I probably had to go there. I feel like when you finally give yourself in the desperate cry to God, and God was waiting for you to surrender that. That doesn't mean your life's gonna. That doesn't mean that just gives God permission to start working.
Yeah.
And He goes, okay. He makes an assessment of where you're at, and He starts to undo and deconstruct so we can rebuild. And that's basically what happened. That's part of my journey. He had to deconstruct me, our relationship, and start building it back. But part of that was healing. I had having to heal, restore my mind, spirit, and mind, will, and emotions, and restore that. But before I could start even healing spiritually and getting right with Him.
So there's a couple of times in your book that you mentioned being hopeless, but specifically you mentioned that you didn't feel there was a God. You didn't feel like God was for you. You didn't feel this connection. And there were several times where you mentioned that you cried out and you didn't get the help that you needed. And I'm just curious, how did you settle on what is God doing during that time? And why isn't He helping you?
It's a good question. I specifically remember reaching a point, because I had faked it. I tried to fake it to make it for a long time. That was something that I learned in our church. And And I get it. I understand what the term means, but I tried to fake it and just hoping one day God would notice me and say, "Well, that guy's doing a good job. I'll get involved in his life." And that's kind of the way I kind of thought it was. It was, I probably knew better, but I didn't have a relationship with him, so I didn't know it. I couldn't figure out what was going on. I got mad.
Yeah.
I remember the date in 2010. I got really angry, and I told him, "You know what? I'm done. If you want me, you know where to find me. You know where I live." Mm-hmm. And I stopped for nearly 2 years. And I mean, basically didn't pray at all. I mean, if I guess there was a possibility I had a day or two in there somewhere, but yeah, I just walked away. If it wasn't for us being married, I would not have gone to church at all. I went begrudgingly, just to keep the peace.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a tough time for me. I never had a doubt that God is who He says who He is. I mean, but I just felt like He just didn't care about me.
Yeah.
And so I said, fine.
Looking back now, did He care about you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, yeah. He never left.
Yeah.
I left. He didn't leave. He was always there.
Gotcha.
And
His timing is perfect. You weren't ready.
I was not. Well, no, I wasn't ready yet. I wasn't healing yet. I mean, 2010 was way before my therapy started.
Yeah.
I was fed up with praying for me didn't work. I wasn't getting healed. I went from one prayer person to another, just hoping that person might have an anointing that would heal me. And that was stuff that was going through my head. And I look back on it now. I know that was silly, but at the time, that's how I felt. That's what I thought.
Randy, as we're talking, and I'm thinking about my past and what I've been through, I did not want to necessarily go through my past and kind of work through that, but I've seen so much healing. So I'm curious, was it worth it to you to do all these things and go back into your past? Has it been worth it to you now?
Yes, absolutely. At the time when I was going through it, I did not want to do it. In fact, I fought myself. I fought my flesh to go to my therapy appointments. I would sit in the car and just want to run.
Yeah.
And I would drag myself inside and go. And then I would come home and smoke a cigar and drink 4 or 5 drinks before I'd retire for the night because I was just so burned out. I mean, it was draining. It was literally the hardest thing I ever did. And I'm not saying that because I don't want anyone to get the impression it's going to be easy. It's not. It takes determination. It takes prayer. It takes everything you got to get up and go do the next day. You're going to feel like you're not going to want to. You're going to feel like you don't have the strength to do today, much less worry about going to an appointment tomorrow. So just take it a day at a time. But I encourage everyone to not give up. Don't ever give up because it's worth it at the end. My end took many, many years, but it's worth it now that I'm there.
Yeah.
I can see that.
I wouldn't say I have my best life yet, but I am well on my way to my best life. And I'm so glad I'm where I'm at right now. And I'm glad I didn't take the easy way out. And I'm glad God didn't grant my prayer and take me home, because I asked Him many times to take me home.
Yeah.
And He even offered me one chance in the MDMA study, and to go home. And I said, no, I'm not done. And I want to finish the race. And
But you always said God gave you just enough.
He did. He gave me just enough strength each day to do what I needed to do that day.
That's exactly what I heard when you were talking. As you were speaking, I was like, yeah, that makes so much sense that you went through this, but there was so much, it was difficult to walk through it. And the picture that I got was the scripture of I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Or Romans 8:28 of how God can turn anything into good. And I see that in your story.
Yeah, those days were very challenging. And I would pray at night. Just because I prayed didn't mean I was happy. I would pray at night and I said, what in the heck are you doing? This is ridiculous. I mean, I don't want to do this anymore. This is too much. I said, why can't you just make it go? I mean, I sometimes just literally cussed him out.
Yeah.
But I was doing it with him.
Yeah.
My heart might not have been in the right place, but I was still going to him. And he has told me, he said, even in your lowest point, you still came to me.
That's right.
And that's all He's asking us to do. We don't have to be right in our hearts or our minds. We don't have to be healed. He doesn't expect us to be. He wants to meet us where we are in that moment, and He will take you through that journey and meet you in where you're at that point in time, to help you through and give you the strength you need to get to the other side. That's all He wants to do, is get you to the other side. Yeah. And that's all I encourage everyone to do, is that don't give up. Just don't give up. Your journey will be different than mine, but don't give up.
Yeah.
You'll love where you go. When you get to the end, you'll love it.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Cynthia, I wanted to ask you, what would you say to the spouse who's in your shoes right now and you're on the other side where you've seen the healing and you've seen what God can do. So what would you say to encourage them?
There were a lot of times where I wouldn't like the way he was acting or something like that, and I finally learned I'd let the Holy Spirit handle it. I would just ask, I don't, he's not going to take this well from me. I need you to put this on his heart. So I did a lot of praying, a whole lot of praying, and I just never give up. Just keep pushing. Because we want to have our best life together, and he also wants to have his best life, and I want to have my best life, right. So there's the three. Mm-hmm. So it's worth it. It's worth the fight. It's worth the struggle. And then you've got a story together. You bond, it's a bonding, it's a bonding.
For better or for worse. And that's what I really hear in your story, Cynthia. You're a strong woman, and just the strength that God gave you to push through and listen to his voice over any other voices, that he wanted you to stay in the marriage. And there's a reason. And now you can see the reason he wanted you to stay was because there was redemption that was coming. And there was, I imagine, a lot of trust and surrender for yourself to really know that, okay, God, you are in control when it sure doesn't look like it.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It was. And, but we grew up in the church. God was part of it from the beginning, and he stayed with us. He stayed with us every bit of it. And so just trust and hope and support.
I really appreciate both of you being here. I am honored that you chose to share your story with the world. Mm-hmm. I'm honored that you chose to share your story with us. Just meeting you guys a month or so ago, and just being able to see your journey from a different point of view, and being able to read your story and just have good conversation with you guys. I know that God is just working huge in your lives, through your lives, and I'm excited to see what he's going to do on the other side. So you guys need to get their book. Their book is amazing. It's coming out in January 2023, the same time that this is coming out. And I can't help but to think that you listening to this, that you watching this, that you may be in a position too where you have had hard struggles in your marriage or in your relationship. You may be curious, like, why do I do the things I do? And, being able to watch Randy and Cynthia on here saying, hey, I've had a life of struggle. I've had a marriage of struggle. I have a hard time dealing with who I am in this world. It's identity, which is the whole reason this book is written, is on identity. And you can be able to get hope out of this. And I hope that you find that. And so thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching this video. And we're just so excited that you chose to be part of this in this journey.
And you can find their book on Amazon. So be sure and check that out. And when the book drops, we will put a link in the description below so you can check it out right there.
Our Born Identity. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Thanks for being part of this. We really appreciate you.
We appreciate it. Thank you.